Fiends, welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I am your host Tezz, and we are back in the live setting, Ministry of Horror HQ as per usual, but this is going out live on twitch.tv/Tezzius, Tezzrius. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you've all enjoyed the past week, whatever horror that has entailed for yourselves. It's been quite a light horror week for me. I kind of had a little bit of a panic. It was either last night or actually it was this morning, where I kind of thought, I got a show to do tonight and I haven't watched any horror. Which seems kind of crazy, but no, it's been a little bit busy, and there just hasn't been anything that's caught my eye, as in new, in the last week. So I thought maybe, okay, well, I could easily do a retro review, easy peasy. But retro reviews are kind of part of the alternate week schedule, the pre-recorded output of the Ministry of Horror. So I thought I'd save that, and I managed to actually find a film to watch. So we do have a review. Coincidentally, I have actually received a link, a screener link, for a new film coming to home media in June. I need to confirm if there is a review embargo on that before going ahead and reviewing that, but I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. But that is a sci-fi horror thriller. So we've mentioned that one, I believe, in the news. I won't mention the name. If you keep your ear to the ground when I do the news, you may be able to sort of whittle it down to a few options. But yeah, fortunate enough to get another advanced copy of that, which is very, very nice of the people at the publishing company. I don't know if I'm allowed to name them or whatnot, but very thankful if they do listen. No, so in terms of what's happened outside the show, it's been the retro gaming. The retro gaming continues. So, if you haven't already, and I know we talked at length about TikTok on the last live show, I recently put up a TikTok showing off this cabinet that I've got in my office, Ministry of Horror HQ. Now, you can't see it because the camera isn't pointed in that direction, but it's got a nice outside of the doors that makes it look like it's full of books, and should be full of books. But up until recently, it's kind of been full of cables and packaging things, and just general bits and bobs that don't have a space anywhere else. But I kind of endeavoured to clear a couple of the shelves up, and I've made myself a nice little bookshelf where I've got my nice book collections or hardbacks. I do need to dig out my Dark Tower, Stephen King's Dark Tower box, and fit that in there as well. But I think that's probably going to be more for when I've got another shelf available. But on the shelf above it, and I've put these little lights on that open when the doors open, it looks very nice. So if you haven't got the TikTok, I can always put a link to that particular reel or TikTok in the Discord, because it shows my little nerdy project. The first of the two shelves that I've cleared has retro. It's got my Nintendo 64. Along with my two games that I have on the Nintendo 64 since I rebought the console a couple of years ago, WWF No Mercy and Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Unfortunately, the N64 has had to kind of live in the closet or in various places of storage, because I just haven't been able to get it to look good on a TV. You could argue, did a Nintendo 64 ever look good? But yes. The problem is these older consoles with SCART or the three-pronged cables, the VGA or whatever they are. It's not VGA, but the three-coloured cables generally look like ass on TV, on modern, flat-screen TVs. Predominantly looking like ass when using a HDMI converter. I'll get onto that a bit more. This is, when I don't have much horror to chat about in terms of my week, you get retro gaming or wrestling. So something has to fill the void of my rambling. So I've tried a couple of HDMI converters that haven't really all worked. One has on a different console, but I'll get to that in a minute. So I've got the N64 in there, so it's looking nice. And in front of it, I've just placed for the time being my 3DS. The 3DS won't be living in there long term because I do pick that up to actually play Ocarina of Time, funnily enough, every so often. Next to it, I got another bargain recently. The Nintendo Wii with like 7 or 8 games, and it was like £20. It's a steal. Works great, looks really nicely cleaned. So that is on the shelf as well. I mean, the games themselves are games that I probably would never play. So I imagine at some point I will, do a charity shop or a CEX trade-in or something, and just keep an eye out for the reason that I kind of honed in on the Nintendo Wii was because this Nintendo Wii is the GameCube compatible version. So my next little projects, I'm keeping an eye out on eBay for a decently priced Zelda Wind Waker, because I never played it. Never played it back in the day. Hey, we got Eddie the Beast in the chat. We got Fran in the chat. Hope you guys are both doing well. Hey Fran. Hey Eddie. Eddie says, "Oh, the Wii is fun, especially with sports." Yeah, I managed to hook that up to one of my monitors, my setup here. I didn't think though that monitor that I hooked it up to didn't have speakers, so I couldn't hear anything. But just testing the console worked a treat. So project for that is, sit it on the shelf in there for the time being because it's very small and compact. But keep an eye out for the GameCube copy of Wind Waker. But then further on from that, I mentioned before I'd picked up a PS2. I was in the process of getting a PS2. And I'd got one of the PS2 Slims, and I'd got Turok Evolution for my girlfriend because she's wanted to play that game again for a very long time. And I also picked up GTA Vice City because I never really played that back in the day. I had the initial reaction to it when it was coming out of, this just looks, from the videos, the previews, it looks the same as GTA 3, but with a different skin. I don't know why I ever had that thought process, because I buy FIFA every single year, and you can argue that more often than not is the same game with just updated teams and maybe a slightly different soundtrack. But yeah, I never played it back in the day, so I picked that up. I had a great time the other night playing a little bit of GTA Vice City, testing it out. I'd done a little tester of Turok, but then when my girlfriend got home from work and we were going to do a bit of a PS2 gaming night, it wasn't reading the disc for Turok. It wasn't loading. And so we were, a bit downhearted about that, a bit annoying. It was the PS2 Slim. I don't know if that's a historic thing with that console. I don't know if it was just the version we had. Looking online, it seemed to be that a lot of the issue seems to be with the disc reader, the laser. Anyway, we'd ordered pizza that night. I hear the front door go, so I go out into the hallway to get the pizza. Again, I just should mention with the PS2s, if people don't know, these older consoles didn't have wireless controllers. I think later years you could get wireless controllers, but this had the wired controllers traditionally. Step outside to get a pizza. I suddenly hear my my girlfriend screaming my dog's name, my dog Bailey, and or our dog, our dog. But the dog that moved in with me, Bailey, screaming his name. And I was just there, the delivery driver, like, I don't know what's happening. And I hear a bang. I walk back in, and Bailey has walked past the PlayStation, got the controller wrapped around himself, and just continued on and yanked the PlayStation off of the TV stand and smashed off the disc cover, because the Slim PS2, the disc, it wasn't so much a disc tray that came out, it was a little disc cover, because it was very much the condensed, compact, cheaper version, cost effective. And I'd literally only about an hour ago messaged some friends saying, "Oh, I'm having a great time playing Vice City, retro gaming, this is awesome." And then an hour after that, I was like, yeah, the PS2 was short-lived. Anyway, long story, not so short. I then went back to eBay. So that one I'd got for £20 odd, fine, whatever. You know, it's not a huge amount of money. You can easily spend £20 just popping in the shops for a few bits and bobs. You know, washing detergent, drinks, whatever. Obviously, don't get those two mixed up. And I went back to eBay. I found a chunky PS2, which is the PS2 type that I had growing up. Again, like £23. Put in a bid, won it. It arrived very quickly. The goddamn console is like pristine. Not only does it work so much better than the slim one that I had, but it's not all dinged up. It's not like, you know, it worked straight away. So I got an absolute steal there. So very happy with that. And then the latest was bidding and surprised myself by winning because I'd completely forgotten about it. An original Xbox, which is one of the consoles I never had growing up. The reason for that is the console that my girlfriend's sister had growing up, and so they'd always play that together. And I kind of figured there's a few games that were Xbox exclusive that I never played. The one for me that I never got to play was the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer game. There was a sequel that came out on Xbox 360, PlayStation 2, I think, or PS3 maybe. Might have been PS2, I'm not sure, called Chaos Bleeds. But I never got to play the original one. So that's what I've... that's the latest, and that's the end of the eBay retro console purchasing for the time being. It will just now be a case of keeping an eye out for the retro games at a reasonable price. The main one I want to look out for, which I think is going to be looking out for a while, is, of course, Wind Waker, Zelda Wind Waker, the GameCube version, which, yes, Fran, GameCube games work on the Wii. I think there was two different versions. There was one where it has a cover for GameCube controllers and memory cards, which is GameCube compatible, and then another one that doesn't have that cover, which isn't, as far as I'm aware. So there's that game. But the other one, which I think is going to be a bit more cost prohibitive, and I'm definitely just going to have to keep an eye out for someone selling, not knowing what they have, is Shadow Hearts. I mentioned it on a previous show. That was a PS2 game that I absolutely loved. It was pretty brutal. It was heavy going. It was an RPG, JRPG, with kind of Lovecraftian horror elements. But that was banging. But it does seem to be quite rare and expensive, so who knows? Fran in the chat also says, I love those tiny little GameCube discs. It's like you shrunk some CDs in the wash. Yeah, very easy to misplace, I would imagine, as well. But yeah, so I managed to get one film watched, which we will review a bit later on. I have started the second series, not the first. I've jumped straight into the second series of Them, called The Scare, which is on Prime. We've talked about it a bit. The preview for it looked really, really cool. I'm two and a bit episodes in. It's pretty decent. I'm not entirely sure where it's going to go. I'm not entirely sure how the killer is doing the kills yet, but I'm sure that will all come in due time. But so far, pretty good. I'm 2 episodes in of 8. They mainly seem to be about half an hour long, which is perfectly fine by me. Oh, Eddie, you may have quite a nice little idea there. That's not a bad idea. That could be another branch. That could be another branch of the show. And maybe that's when I pay retro consoles, is actually properly hook them up and stream it, which who knows, because I'm too lazy to hook up my Xbox, which is right next to my computers, to a capture card. But hey, Ministry of Consoles. I don't hate that. I don't hate that. Fran in the chat says, if you want to play it at some point, struggle to find a copy, I'm happy to lend you the GameCube Wind Waker. Oh, that'd be awesome, Fran. That would be awesome. I will, yeah, I've bid on a couple. I've kind of got in my head a ceiling for what I'm willing to spend, because I very much think, well, how much have I spent on consoles? And I wouldn't want to spend more than that, because I've managed to get some good bargains. So for me, the games that I want to buy, like Vice City, I picked up for £4.50, and it's like pristine. I've done really well with that. It's got the map and the manual. Buffy the Vampire Slayer has the manual with it. That was £6. And Turok was £2.30. So I'm kind of and I expect Wind Waker is currently a bit more, but I've seen various different sort of prices. So I very much look at games with a bit of a ceiling of what I'd like to spend. But yeah, I may well take you up on that in the future, Fran. I think at the moment we will get onto horror. I just am enjoying talking about gaming because I'm really enjoying my game at the moment. I finally finished Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy Clive. Had a great time. I've so far resisted the urge to jump into the dwindling bank with all these retro consoles and buy the game which I want, which is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. But I never finished Remake because I lost my save file. My console had sort of died and my saves lost with it because they weren't in the cloud. I have restarted that, and now that I've finished Final Fantasy 16, I've jumped back into Remake. I'm skipping through all the videos that I would have seen before. So in terms of the games that I'm focusing on, I'm still dabbling on Ocarina of Time. I'm going to make sure I keep on top of that. But Final Fantasy 16 sort of dominated my gaming time, similar to Spider-Man 2, and Baldur's Gate 3 is still in the workings. But yeah, gaming is a nice little balance. But yeah, I think I could maybe look at doing like a every other week. I'd have to. It's just finding that nice balance of not being too intrusive on home, but also having a bit of fun. So Ministry of Gaming could be just the Twitch exclusive thing because unless I talked about history of gaming, I'm not. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe that's another podcast. Why not? You have a physical copy on order, Fran says in the chat, of Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah, enjoy it. It is a lot of fun. It was initially a bit full on for me in terms of the mechanics, but yeah, the story is so just incredible. So enjoy that when it arrives. So in terms of tonight's show, we are going to review a film, and that film is called Cold Meat. This appeared on Paramount this week. We'll be reviewing that a bit later on. Then The Scare, which is what I was talking about earlier on. I'm a couple of episodes in, so I'll probably be looking to review that in the next couple of weeks, along with this new film that I've had received a copy of. But in terms of the featured presentation for tonight, God, you can tell it's a live show because I haven't even got to the preview of tonight's show, and it's half an hour in. The main discussion for tonight's show is we're going to do something a little bit different. We're not going to look at a director's body of work. We're not going to look at a film series per se. We'll partially look at one. But more often than not with horror, when it comes to either characters or sometimes the actresses, let's say, there's a focus on the Scream Queen. Horror is kind of synonymous with the Scream Queen. Jamie Lee Curtis is a Scream Queen. In turn, her character Laurie Strode is a Scream Queen. Jennifer Love Hewitt's character in the first two I Know We Did Last Summer's Scream Queens. And then obviously, you can go much further back and further forward to look at actresses that become synonymous with horror, characters and franchises, so on and so forth. But something which doesn't really get discussed much in horror is... would you say the Scream King, the Slasher King, the Slasher Jester? Who knows? But I wanted to focus on an actor who isn't really always initially associated with horror, but has actually done quite a few horror films. So a bit later on, we're going to be talking about some, not all, because I haven't seen all of them, but some of the horror films and projects of Justin Long. He's an actor we've talked about briefly before, incredibly charming actor in a lot of his films. I've never seen him bad in a film. He's been in some bad films, but I always think his performances are the standouts in those films. So later on, the main featured presentation is going to be a selection of the horror films from Justin Long. So without further ado, I think it's time we jump into some horror news. This is the news. bit of horror news in the chat that I've just seen. Brown the Cannon, for those that don't have Shudder, ITVX has added season 1 to 4 of Creepshow to it. I keep forgetting that ITVX has quite a nice little selection of horror, and at various times BBC iPlayer does. Those are two of the apps that I always sleep on quite a bit, and it's baffling because the amount of times where I get to an evening and I'm looking for a horror film, or my girlfriend says, I'm quite happy to watch a horror film tonight if you want to watch something, something to review for the show. And I'll go to Sky, I'll go to the horror film section, I'll go and scroll through all of the same films, and Sky does bring through into their selection the various platforms that are linked with Sky, because Sky has apps on it. I'll go to Prime, I'll go to Shudder. Shudder, more often than not, doesn't have a new film section, so it's kind of been difficult to see what's been added to their system. Go to Netflix, and Netflix is quite crap for horror. New horror, I should say. It does get some classics on there. It's got a lot of world cinema horror, if that's your bag. But they're not so good. Netflix these days with horror releases. I think the only thing that I've got on my to watch list from there is I'm still working through Castlevania Nocturne, and they've got a live action Parasite series or film, Parasite film, based on the manga, which then had an anime based on it. I've seen a bit of the anime and it's disturbing. So I've got that on my watch list. But yeah, Netflix hasn't really been that good for horror for a little while, I don't think. And yeah, Prime hit and miss. Prime's got a lot more stuff on there now since they don't do watch parties, which is BS. But yeah, I've been sleeping on ITVX and to an extent BBC iPlayer. And I do think the 4OD or 4 player, whatever it's now called, app sometimes has horror films on there. Yeah, I need to stop forgetting about those ones. They've normally got some gems there. Well, the first bit of horror news, this all comes from bloodydisgusting.com, as per usual. This is right from John Squires. It's the 5 new horror movies releasing this week, including Abigail at Home already. So, first up on the list. Less than 2 months after releasing in theatres, where it scared up a $195.2 million at the box office, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is now available on digital at home. You can rent the film for $19.99 or purchase it for $24.99. In Gil Keenan's Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, the Spengler family returns to where it all started, the iconic New York City firehouse, to team up with the original Ghostbusters, who've developed a top-secret research lab to take busting ghosts to the next level. But when the discovery of an ancient artifact unleashes an evil force, Ghostbusters new and old must join forces to protect their home and save the world from a second ice age. Frozen Empire it's fine. It's decent enough. To me, it's what Afterlife could have been if it didn't hit all the right buttons. Because for me, Afterlife was brilliant. I know not everyone liked it, but I really enjoyed Afterlife. It hit a lot of emotional points. Frozen Empire is fine. It's just as we talked about in the review that I had Lawrence on to discuss. There was just a bit of overcrowding. There was just a little bit much going on there. And some of the plot beats, not quite there. It's a fun enough film. I didn't have a bad time watching it. It's fine. But if Afterlife is like an 8.5, 8 to 8.5 out of 10, Frozen Empire is like a 6.5, and I think that's what we gave it in the review. As Fran says in the chat, the fact Law wasn't that high and it was pretty damning of it considering his love of the franchise. Yeah. It's one that may be a repeat viewing. That'll be a bit more fun. I mean, to me, this one felt a bit more fan service heavy than Afterlife. And that was one of the complaints some reviewing circles had with Afterlife, was too much fan service. I think that was a bit more the case here for me, personally. Less than 1 month, next up this is, after releasing in theatres, Universal's ballerina vampire horror movie Abigail is also now available on digital at home by premium VOD rental or purchase. Sorry, it sounds like something's going on downstairs. My friend probably didn't pick it up, but I think the dogs are going crazy. You can purchase the film for $24.99 or rent it for $19.99, which that's such a weird pricing structure. Like, I get it when the pandemic was going on, the cinemas were closed, and it's like, I'd be spending, we'll just say dollars for pounds at this sake, I'll be spending £20 to see it at the cinema, because sometimes that's the cinema prices seem to fluctuate massively from film and screen to whatever. Okay, I'd be spending that anyway to see it in the cinema, and I'd only be seeing it once, so that's fine. And then for $5 more, you then own it. But then obviously in the cinema, you're getting a massive screen, surround sound, all that good stuff. Like, I am a big fan of the cinema experience when it's done right. But yeah, the pricing structure, I always think, okay, $24.99 to own it digitally. It's a bit steep, but it's before the general release. Okay, fine. But then to rent it, $20, I don't know, it seems a little bit, yeah. I really enjoyed Abigail. I think it had, as we did in the review the last show, it really had a good mix of violence, humour, tension, and also the design with the vampirisms, I'll just say. I really thought pretty good. I think it could have probably gone a bit heavier in the gore aspects in times, but I think maybe that would have been too far out versus the humour, because the humour is there quite a lot. But again, it's not too much. It doesn't become too sort of campy and jokey. I really think it was a great balance in Abigail. Okay, now this is a film that I noticed in the new film section, and I was tempted. It was one of the films me and Victoria were potentially going to watch the other night, but I looked at the trailer and thought, I don't know. Next one on this list is, after being released exclusively in movie theatres in January, the tricentennial-themed slasher movie Founders Day is now available on digital courtesy of Dark Sky Films. In this bold political slasher from the Blumquist brothers, that name rings a bell. A small town is shaken, or those names I should say. The small town is shaken by a series of ominous killings in the days leading up to a heated mayoral election. As accusations fly and the threat of a masked killer darkens every street corner, the residents must race to uncover the truth before fear consumes the town. We're very happy to be partnering with the team at Dark Sky, who know and love the power of genre cinema like we do, said the Blumquist brothers. As the chaos of modern politics rages, the Founder is primed and ready to be unleashed on American audiences. Yeah, I watched the trailer because I thought, ooh, have I heard of this? Have we talked about it in the news before? Maybe? Must have done. Check the trailer out. I thought, it does. I didn't think it looked that good, so I haven't watched it. But yeah, that's now out. Oh, we've got Crimson Mel in the chat. Hey, Crimson Mel of the Unexplained Possibilities podcast. Hope you're doing good. Welcome to the show, and also, congrats on the recent show with Lawrence and Merrill. That was a really good watch. We watched it live, joined in on the chat. So if you're fans of the paranormal, fans of horror in general and paranormal, go check out the Unexplained Possibilities podcast on podcast platforms and on YouTube. Give Mel a subscribe. So yeah, Founders Day. I don't know. I didn't think it looked that good. I could be wrong. Sometimes you shouldn't judge shouldn't judge a film by a trailer. Sometimes though, just trust your judgment. Next, a yoga influencer discovers just how flexible fear can be in Mind, Body, Spirit, a new found footage horror movie that Welcome Villain Films has brought to the table this week. Mind, Body, Spirit is now available on VOD outlets. This talks about a review about it. We'll skip that. In Mind, Body, Spirit, Anya, an aspiring young yoga influencer, embarks on a ritual practice left behind by her estranged grandmother. She documents the practice on her YouTube channel for the world to watch, allowing her audience intimate access to her journey. But what starts as a spiritual self-help guide evolves into something much more sinister. As Anya becomes obsessed with the mysterious power of the practice, she unwittingly unleashes an otherworldly entity that begins to take control of her life and her videos. Now Anya must race to unlock the truth before her descent into madness threatens to consume her mind, body, and spirit. By the time she reveals the true nature of the ritual, will it be too late? Okay. I haven't seen the trailer. It's a knockout horror session for the live stream era, says Matt Donata in their review on Bloody Disgusting. Sounds like it could be kind of interesting. You know, I'm sometimes with these new film blurbs, I read them and think, oh, God, it's I don't know. I'm a little bit more open-minded on that one. I mean, the concept doesn't really interest me too much of a yoga influencer. I mean, I see the word influencer, and it gives me a little bit of a shudder. It gives me a little bit of a, like someone's walked over my grave. Just because you kind of know what sort of people you're getting in those sort of films. And it's a little bit off-putting. But Crimson Mail in the chat says, thanks, Tezz. Gonna message you this weekend. Ooh, I look forward to that message. Thank you very much. So next up, the feature directorial debut of Francis Galuppi, Western thriller The Last Stop in Yuma County, arrives this Friday, May 10th from Well Go USA in select theatres and VOD. While it's not purely a horror movie, horror fans will undoubtedly want to check out The Last Stop in Yuma County because it's the film that landed Galuppi the next Evil Dead movie. Okay. In the last stop in Yuma County, while awaiting the next fuel truck at a middle-of-nowhere Arizona rest stop, a traveling young knife salesman is thrust into a high-stakes hostage situation by the arrival of two similarly stranded bank robbers with no qualms about using cruelty or cold, hard steel to protect their blood-stained, ill-gotten fortune. Jocelyn Donahue and Barbara Crampton star alongside Jim Cummings, Richard Brake, Faison Love. That name rings a bell. Alex Esser, Michael Abbott Jr., Sienna McCormick, Nicholas Logan, Sam Huntington, Connor Paolo, Robin Bartlett, John Proudstar, Ryan Masson, and Gene Jones. So that's got a pretty decent little cast list going on there. I think standouts being obviously Barbara Crampton, Jocelyn Donahue as well. Shouldn't be slept on. I believe she was the star in House of the Devil, Ty West's House of the Devil, and Richard Brake, of course, has really got a bit of a niche for himself, along with a number of appearances from Rob Zombie horrors. But that is it for the new horror films. Let's have a look. Crimson Mail says Faison Love. That's unexpected. I'm going to have to do a quick little Google because why does that name ring a bell? I think it's because I see Faison and I initially think that Donald Faison was in Scrubs. But Faison Love isn't in Scrubs. Faison Love. Oh, comedian. Yes. Friday. Okay, yeah. He's in Friday. Wow, okay, fair enough. There we go. So that is it for the new horror films. We've got a few more little news pieces to go on before we get to our review. So this has been hitting the newswaves the last couple of days. Crystal Lake update. A24 is going in a different way with the Friday the 13th TV series. So this comes from John Squires, Bloody Disgusting. This week has brought a lot of confusion about Crystal Lake. The A24 Peacock and Brian Fuller, from who did Hannibal, television series expansion of the Friday the 13th franchise. While reports and rumours spread about A24 pulling the plug on the series, we told you on Monday that that's not exactly the case. Rather, the project is being retooled behind the scenes. So what exactly is going on here? Brian Fuller has taken to Instagram tonight to provide an update. The bad news? Fuller is no longer involved with the Crystal Lake series. The good news? That doesn't mean A24 is giving up hope on the project. So, Fuller writes on Instagram, adapting classic horror is something I have some experience with. These shows require a vision that elevates and transforms as well as delivers what audiences have come to expect, which is an ambitious and risky endeavour. It requires people to take the leap with me. When it works, as with Hannibal, the results can be powerful for the storytellers and the audience. I couldn't be more proud of the work my co-showrunner in Jim Danger Gray and I were able to accomplish with our brilliant writing staff despite the challenges we faced. For reasons beyond our control, A24 selected to go a different way with the material. We hope the final project will be something Friday the 13th fans all over the world will enjoy. A24 and Peacock are now searching for a new showrunner for the series. Stay tuned. So, if people don't know, Crystal Lake was deemed to be an expanded prequel to the Friday the 13th franchise. Friday the 13th, Jason Voorhees, so on and so forth. But apparently, original Friday the 13th final girl, Adrienne King, had even signed on for a recurring role in the planned TV series. Now, when I hear that a horror project is going to go in a different direction, like a horror TV project, I do initially start panicking that it might go the CW way of things. Now, if you don't know what that means, CW is a television network or station, whatever the corresponding grouping is in America, that kind of had a bit of a stereotype for these glossy teen dramas where everyone is a supermodel and everyone lives in mansions and it's all quite dramatic and whatnot. But this is A24, who have a pretty good track record. I don't know what their track record is like in TV. I don't know if they've dabbled in television before. But generally, when it comes to A24 releases, and I'll say specifically horror, because they don't just do horror, but the horror films that I've seen under the A24 banner, more often than not, I've really enjoyed. It is sad, though, to see that they're not going ahead with Brian Fuller, because Hannibal was art for me. The Hannibal TV series, I thought, just got better and better. Every episode was like a taunt, high production value, high concept thriller with chilling moments. It wasn't over the top gory. There were moments where you saw what had occurred and it was just disturbing, but it was brilliantly done. So when I heard that Brian Fuller was involved in Crystal Lake, I thought, okay, this is really going to up the quality of what this production could be, which is already a A24 production. Yeah, they don't really sort of put crap out. Yeah, it's a shame, but I'm still going to reserve hope that this one goes ahead, because we have been starved of Friday the 13th content for a while. I think more so than Nightmare on Elm Street, because with the Jason character or the world, there's a number of different ways you could go there. There's a number of different people that could play that role. I know everyone says, oh, it's Kane Hodder's role. I think people forget how late into the series he did come. No disrespect to Kane, but I don't put as much weight on the performers. I guess I just don't focus that much on the performance. But other people have done admirable jobs stepping into the Jason shoes. With Freddy, we've already seen it hasn't necessarily worked with a very good actor in Jackie Earl Haley. I don't know what his name is. I want to say Jackie Earl Haley. That sounds about right. But that film wasn't very good anyway. Point being, that's a world that I would like to see more of, but I just don't know. I think it's going to be so hard. I know we're getting sidetracked. We're not talking about Nightmare on Elm Street, but Freddy, Jason, they're kind of synonymous with each other at this point. Yeah, let's keep an eye out on Crystal Lake and hope for the best, because we need some more Jason. We do. It's fun. Let's move on. So next up in the news, we'll have a quick look at the chat. So, quick question from Eddie. What horror movie villain do you think you'll be able to survive against? Well, I'm not quick on my feet, so none of them. I guess maybe It Follows for a while, just because it doesn't run after you, so I've maybe got a bit of a chance. I probably would get a bit tired from looking over my shoulder constantly. Not too sure. Crimson Man in the chat. Oh boy, not a good sign when someone leading the project exits out. No, it's concerning. It's not always the death knell. I mean, Frank Darabont was a leading force behind The Walking Dead Series 1. Don't know exactly the ins and outs, but he left in unacrimonious circumstances. Or acrimonious, I don't know which one's the correct word to use there. After the first series. But I don't think it was death now. I think Walking Dead still had some good strengths, some good high points post Series 1. Series 1 was just really, really good start to finish. Nice short series. But it is always a worry when a driving force, a driving creative force, especially one who's quite well respected, bows out of a project. Crimson Mail also says The Vampire Diaries is a good example of that. The CW is sometimes trash, but Supernatural was amazing. Yeah, Supernatural still need to one day finish. I'm thinking of abandoning my rewatch and just sort of jumping into one of the later series that I maybe have seen but can't remember too much of, and then continuing into the series that I haven't seen. That's probably just going to be easier because there's just so many episodes, like 20 odd episodes a season, and there's like 15 seasons. But yeah, that's a good example. And also I believe Buffy was on the CW at some point, and Buffy was great. Fran the Cannon, no, and retooling is never a good word to have associated with a project. Yeah, that's what makes me a little bit nervous. Fran also says, loved Supernatural, only saw the first couple of seasons of The Vampire Diaries. Never saw Vampire Diaries myself. Crimson Mel says, Supernatural was legit. It got a little over the top, but it was a fun ride. Yeah, I think Supernatural, even on the seasons where the big bad or certain episodes were a bit lackluster, you had the trio. Well, you had the duo of the brothers, but then they also had the extended cast. It was a very well cast show, and that really helped move things forward. Even some of the seasons that I have seen were like, yeah, they're fine, but I don't really care about this big bad, or more filler episodes than other. You know, it happens sometimes, but the casting was really good on that show. Crimson Mel also says in the chat, maybe lightning will strike and Crystal Lake might end up being decent like the Chucky TV show. Now, I did look to jump back into the Chucky TV show. In the UK, we don't have any of Series 3 yet. It could be because they're waiting for it to finish fully. I don't know where we're at in the US release. I know it's been in 2 parts. But all we've got is Series 1 and 2. I can't remember how far I got into Series 2. It feels like from the looks of it, there's only 8 episodes, so it feels like I had actually watched the majority of it. So I may jump in at the halfway point, see how much I've seen of that to finish it. But I was tempted, because I recently rewatched Child's Play 1 and had a great time, to jump back into that. But yeah, you know, Chucky is a pretty decent show. So, next up in the news, Manuel Garcia Ruffalo joins the cast of the new Jurassic World movie. The next installment in the Jurassic World franchise, this is John Squires' writer, continues to build its main cast, with Deadline reporting that Manuel Garcia Ruffalo of the Lincoln Lawyer has signed on. He'll join the previously announced Scarlett Johansson and Jonathan Bailey in the franchise's next installment, arriving summer 2025. Gareth Edwards, who did 2014's Godzilla and the Creator, will be directing the next installment, with original Jurassic Park writer David Cope returning to write the screenplay. Jurassic World returns to theatres on July 2nd, 2025. Stay tuned. The next movie is expected to usher in a brand new Jurassic era, with Jurassic World cast members Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard not expected to return. Don't expect the original trilogy's Jeff Goldblum, Laura Dern, and Sam Neill either. The new Jurassic World, from what we gather, plans to take the franchise in a new direction, with plot details under wraps. The next one will be executive produced by Steven Spielberg through Amblin Entertainment. Frank Marshall and Patrick Crowley will produce, and David Leitch and Kenny McCormick will also produce through 87 North. Yeah, okay, so So, Jurassic World, Jurassic Park is an odd one. I love Jurassic Park. It still holds up today. It's a film that was released in, I want to say 93, 94 maybe, probably 92. But 93 sounds about right. And it still looks great today. You know, it's one of those films where the practical effects were done so well that it's still, I mean, you know, Lord of the Rings, it's very CGI heavy, doesn't look like it. I still think Lord of the Rings looks incredible today. And you get other films from the same sort of era that just look, the CGI just makes it look so terrible. Jurassic Park is incredible. Jurassic Park 2, I enjoy enough from the most part. I don't think it wasn't as good. And I think the thing that always drags it down a bit for me is when I remember that the T-Rex goes round at San Francisco near the end. And I always just thought that was a bit Godzilla. I get from a narrative perspective, you know, it's one thing having a dinosaur still alive in the jungle, but imagine that going around the city. I think whenever I've done a rewatch of Jurassic Park 2, I've always ended up zoning out before the end. It's got good moments, it's got a few good attacks in it, but, you know, not as good as the first. And Jurassic Park 3, I probably do need to give a rewatch of that, but I just remember feeling that there was no stakes in that, which sounds crazy because they're looking for the missing child of this couple in that, but it just felt like there was all these attacks, but that never came to anything. You know, in Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park 2, there were moments where it's like characters, whether they're goodies or baddies, got taken down. It just felt with the third one that they had these good moments, but then they kind of meant nothing. I don't know. I probably need to rewatch it. Don't worry, we're not going to just blurb into a Jurassic Park episode. Jurassic World, though, I think is fun. And the second Jurassic World, what was that called? Fallen Kingdom. That got a bit slated in the reviews, but I thought, you know what, okay. It's not amazing, but Fallen Kingdom I thought was fine. It had a few more kind of little horror elements in the end with some stalk and slash moments, which are a little bit more akin to the raptor segments pursuing the kids in the first film. You know, that's one of the best bits in the film. Really, really good tense stuff. So Fallen Kingdom I thought was actually a lot more fun than it got made out to be in reviews. But Jurassic World Dominion, man, that was such a misstep for me. And the fact that it had Laura Dern back for the first time, Sam Neill's returning, you know, Jeff Goldblum's been in a few now. Dominion just wasn't fun. And it dragged for me. I remember sort of thinking, this can't be as bad as the reviews have made it out to be, but it felt, I don't know, poor. So we've kind of got to that stage with the sequels now where I'm not that fussed with a new Jurassic World film, you know. Fingers crossed it's decent. I think it's probably the right move to focus on new characters because ultimately the story is about the dinosaurs, right? It's good to have returning characters every so often, you know, to follow on their story. But sometimes their story has been and gone and they've now moved on to whatever. And I think that's fine. And you're going to have other characters encountering other scenarios that they have to work through. Doesn't always have to just be the same rehashing over and over again. Let's move on. Got a couple more news bits to get through, then we're on to our review. So, Round the Decay. Exclusive images preview creature features practical monster. This is a Sean Decker writer. Fresh new label, Dreamscape Productions, has wrapped principal photography on their creature feature Round the Decay, and they provided blood disgusting with some of the first look stills of the film's cast and the peak at the flick's monster, the Rex Soul. Writer and director Adam Newman teases the original practical creation as the centre of the film, played by Rachel Pizzolatto. The Rexall is inspired by many creatures of films past, but the sum equals something fresh and unique. We can't spoil too much, but we have an extensive lore that you're going to have to check out once Round the Decay is released. Check out the exclusive images along with the film's poster art below. Melody Kay from The Neverending Story 3 will star alongside Victoria Mira, Phil Duran, Damien Maffei, Sarah Nicklin, and Roger Clark of Red Dead Redemption 2. Oh, okay. Round the Decay follows Kenzie as she gets entangled in a sinister plot in the sleepy town of Newport Valley to get closure on her broken engagement. When prominent locals take in a lost hiker, Kenzie, newcomer Roz, and mysterious outsider Munro find themselves caught between the leaders of the town's factions and entangled in an ancient, sinister plot dating back to its founders that threatens the survival of the town and their lives. Yeah, there's a close-up. There's an image of a creature, but you can't really see what that is. Can't see too clearly what's going on in those pictures. I mean, the plot doesn't really give too much away. It sounds like it could be quite fantastical, but yeah, all right, there's a creature feature. What's the worst that can happen? In the chat, Fran said, "Yes, I've learned that lesson. I'll try and watch the film before then reading a book now." So, I've missed a few bits in the chat. So, Crimson Mel has said, the best way to describe Jurassic Park 2 is a good movie with a 15-minute extended ending that wasn't needed. Yeah. Perfectly right. And I know some people had a moan about the gymnastics moment with the raptor, but I didn't think it was a big deal. At the end of the day, the kid was a gymnast, and that's an approach that a raptor wouldn't have ever encountered before. And it worked to disorientate and buy some time. So, didn't have a problem with that. But the ending is the issue, really. Finally in the news, Nightmares and Daydreams teaser. Joko Anwar's sci-fi horror anthology series debuts on Netflix this June. Comes from Megan Navarro. Indonesian filmmaker Joko Anwar, who did Satan's Slaves, which is pretty good, and Impetigore, known internationally for stylish and gory horror, has a supernatural anthology series debuting on Netflix this summer with Nightmares and Daydreams. A new teaser gives a closer look at the strange phenomena haunting this dreamy new series. Joko Anwar's Nightmares and Daydreams arrives globally on Netflix on June 14th, 2024. Netflix describes it as a supernatural thriller series that shows there isn't necessarily a rational explanation beyond every occurrence. A sci-fi supernatural series about ordinary people encountering strange phenomena that may be keys to the answer about the origin of our world and the imminent threat we will soon face. Characters and plots will intertwine like pieces of a puzzle, and the big picture will be awe-inspiring. The 7-episode series presents a different story and a new set of actors in each installment, leading up to a big showdown in the finale. Okay, yeah, I mean, I enjoyed Satan's Slaves. I haven't seen Impetigore, but it's one of those films that always is present, ever present on the Shudder homepage. So, yeah, I want to keep an eye out for the imagery that is shown. There's one image that's available. There is a trailer, but I haven't watched that yet. The image looks kind of creepy. It's got these individuals in a dark room that's got like a red lighting to it with these upside down triangles on their backs from the looks of things in front of these weird looking gods or sculptures or something. Creepy. Looks like it could be pretty good. So I want to keep an eye out for. So anyway, that is it for another edition of the horror news. That was the news. Oh, 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 oh. Bosh. Bing bang bosh. So, we're going to get on to our one and only review this week. Apologies if you look forward to the reviews. There's only one. Just hasn't really been that much that's caught my eye. even looking at the store on Amazon, I know normally I'm a cheapskate and I'll just go for what's what's free on the streaming platforms, but I did check the store. We're going to go with Cold Meat. Cold Meat is a 2023 release, directed by Sebastian Drurin, who also wrote along with James Kermack and Andrew Desmond, starring Alan Leach, Nina Bergman, and Jan Tal, and that is it. So, if you know, if you know from previous shows, when I realised this was a incredibly small cast, my feelings on not my feelings on those sorts of films, but just they're not my favourite. So, a driver saves a waitress from her ex. He continues driving but crashes during a blizzard. Now injured and trapped in a ravine, he spots a beast stalking him. With dwindling time, he must find a way to survive the cold and the predator. So, I'm going to get into minor spoilers in this film because whilst that setup would work, it is misleading for a reason. Crimson Mel in the chat says, "I'll need to send you a soundbite of my evil laugh." Yeah, Mel does a very good laugh. Mel needs to be doing some voiceover work for sure, man. So I'm going to get into minor spoiler territory because that is quite a misleading setup for the film. And again, I think that misleading element would work if the change up didn't happen quite so early in this film. But essentially, a guy stops at a diner where his waitress is getting incredibly intimidated by her drunk ex, who comes in demanding custody of their daughter. The drunk ex then starts becoming quite threatening to the driver, the man, when he makes a comment about this guy's behaviour. And the driver ends up then going out into this blizzard. There's a little bit of a, cat and mouse between him and the ex-boyfriend of the waitress. But he ends up trapped in this blizzard, pouring down constant snow, incredibly low temperatures. And he ends up trying to get out of his car and have a mooch about. In terms of the beast stalking him, I think that's, again, a bit misleading. There's a very brief moment of that, and that doesn't really play in till really near the end, and it feels thrown together a bit because of that. There's the reason why I think that is quite misleading is because literally 10-15 minutes in, while he's gone out of his car to initially kind of like look for help or whatnot, and sees this beast supposedly, it turns out he has the waitress gagged and tied up in the boot of his car. So the bait and switch is that this guy is a serial killer. And again, normally I'm very hands off when it comes to spoilers, or if there is a spoiler, then I make it clear we're talking spoilers. But normally with reviews, I tend to go fairly spoiler free. And if I do have any potential spoilers, they're for the first half of the film, because I really kind of feel the first half of the film is your setup for what's going to be coming up. So from there, I would say it's a cat and mouse game, but it's not. It is her trying to gain control in the car, and lots of discussion and trying to find out who this guy is, and also why he is doing this and what history he has. Now, for a film that has predominantly two actors in it, and the majority of it is their converse and back and forth at times, but also slowly succumbing to the elements, normally I find that incredibly boring, not my thing at all. And this does pass the time. Is that praise or not? Make your own mind up. But it in terms of that setup, it wasn't as bad as some, or when I say bad, it wasn't as much of not my thing as some. I mean, the performances I think were both pretty good. Alan Leach and Nina Bergman hold things together quite well. Alan Leach's initially calm, mild-mannered approach at the very start of the film before he starts showing the psychotic side of him. I like that kind of that kind of double-barreled approach. Nina Bergman as the scared waitress at the start of the film with her ex, to then becoming a bit of a survivor because she has a kid she needs to get home to, and things aren't looking good out here. She's essentially being taken to be murdered. They do work together quite well. I will give it that. I think my prejudice, I should probably be honest to say, when it comes to these sort of films where it's just two people in one location, that just doesn't interest me. It doesn't have much variety. While the story itself being told through the dialogue can be interesting, it never kind of raises it for my viewing pleasure enough past the point of that being a noticeable limitation. I mentioned as well something coming into play a little bit later on near the end. The ending for this film just felt so... It felt so thrown together. In terms of what actually happens, again, I'm not going to go into deep spoilers, but when the finale hits, it just feels like it comes out of left field. I don't necessarily think it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't think it works very well here. Yeah, performances are a highlight. The score wasn't noticeable, which I think, sometimes it's good when you're having a fresh watch of a film to be like, I really like what they're doing with the score here. But if the score doesn't provide any moments, really, other than your kind of atypical shrill moments for tension, then it doesn't provide too much. I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10. It's not a bad film. It's held up by the performances, and the story itself, for the most part, is decent. It's just... I'm just not really a fan of that kind of setup, and the ending, I just thought, what is going on? You could argue that ending... that came out of nowhere. You could argue, well, the ending didn't come out of left field. It's foreshadowed, especially there is a voiceover at the start of the film, which kind of seems a bit odd when the film's going on. You think, well, what's that got to do with anything? I still think that's the case, but okay, yeah, fair enough. Maybe I needed to watch it again and pay a bit more attention. Don't know. 5.5 out of 10. Let's have a quick look at the chat before we move on. Fran, have you seen the trailer for the Funko Fusion video game? No, what's that? I'd heard nothing about this game until this dropped, but it's got some horror in it. Oh, it was in Funko Pops. Crimson Mel, I sort of enjoy a minimalist approach, but it has to have a very good story. Has to have very good storytelling to make it work. Yeah. The storytelling in this is okay. Not incredible, but not. I've seen worse. Ed the Beast. It's not the RKO out of nowhere. It's the yawn out of nowhere. I mean, both of them have the ability to just take you out, without preparation. So you got to be prepared. That is. Oh, I didn't even play the review music. That is it for our reviews. So it's now time for our featured presentation. There we go. We are here now to talk a little bit about the horror features, the ones that I've seen, of one Mr. Justin Long. Now, Justin Long, as I kind of mentioned at the top of the show, he's an actor that's normally associated with comedy roles. He's a very funny chap. Your average Joe, who may be able to associate the name Justin Long, would probably think, okay, yeah, Dodgeball, Accepted, it's just a very, very funny sort of, dorm comedy. I really enjoy that. Live Free or Die Hard, which I think gets... I've always thought that got a worse rap than necessary, It's got some cheesy moments. What they do with John McClane, sort of making him Rambo at times, I thought was just a bit... We've jumped the shark. But I thought Justin Long worked quite well in that film. Zack and Miri make a porno. There you go. But he has done a number of horror films. And true, they're not all standouts. But his roles in them have always been quite good. And he's played a variety of roles, not just the same character over and over again. Justin Long was born June 2nd, 1978 in Fairfield, Connecticut in the US. And we're going to focus first off on probably one of his most notable roles in horror films. And that is the very first Jeepers Creepers. Now, while I was doing the research for this show, I'd kind of forgotten about how much I used to like Jeepers Creepers back in the day. And it did get me thinking about the reasons why I haven't seen it or the second film. I've not seen any of the other sequels, but I haven't seen it or the second film for quite a long time. And that just brings up the whole argument of separating the art from the artist. And the fact that I listen to Michael Jackson's music and there's a lot of problematic claims there, you'd think that there shouldn't be an issue when it comes to this. But essentially, without going into all of the horrible details, Jeepers Creepers was written and directed by Victor Salva, who was convicted of a heinous crime on the set of his film Clown House. It's called Clown House from the 80s. So he is a convicted, I don't know if I should say the word, but bad man. And it was one of those things where I didn't know that at the time I was seeing Jeepers Creepers. I remember the trailers for this coming out and thinking, oh, this looks pretty good. And just thinking it's incredible. I mean, yeah, as the film goes on, the more you see of the creeper the first time you watch it, you sort of takes a little bit of the creepiness away. I do think the creepiness of the creeper, I do think the creeper does look generally quite creepy, when you look back on it now and you've seen other sort of horror monsters. There is the intrigue into, will we ever find out more about this creature? Will we ever see what happened? We'll get to the sequel 23 years later, did it awaken again and all that? And I don't think we've ever really got those answers in the sequels. And from what I hear, the sequels go from bad to much, much worse. Haven't seen 3 and Reborn, or the remake, but this was a 2001 horror film, which I do think I should rewatch at some point. Because I do remember this just being very, very good. And the first time seeing this, the ending being really shocking, because I just did not see it coming. 2001 horror film, written and directed by Victor Salva. It stars Gina Phillips and Justin Long as siblings returning home for spring break who encounter a violent truck driver portrayed by Jonathan Breck. The film takes its name from the 1938 song, which featured in the film under a version by Paul Whiteman. I remember catching this, and initially you assume it's just a thriller. You don't get reveals like it's supernatural. And also, if people haven't heard, apparently the setup is based on a true story. There's an episode of this. I don't know what the name of the show was, but if anyone's ever watched like on the Crime Investigation Channel or Living or whatever, and the Discovery Plus is full of them. I love them. But there's reenactment shows of true crimes. There's like one on stalking called Obsession Dark Desire, which is pretty good, but pretty shocking, some of the stories. Anyway, one of those sort of recreation shows apparently is based initially on this setup where an old couple were driving along this country road and there was a violent van driver, and next thing they saw, the van driver was parked outside of a church where it looked like he was carrying a body bag and putting it down a chute. And apparently that was a serial killer. which is just very, very, very creepy. Um, so yeah, this has Trish Jenner and her brother Darry played by Justin Long, traveling home from a college for spring break. They drive through the Florida countryside, and an old truck violently tailgates them, but eventually passes. They see the same truck parked next to an abandoned church, with the driver dumping what appears to be bodies wrapped in blood-stained sheets into a large pipe sticking out the ground. The driver notices them, giving chase and forcing them off the road. And then yeah, from there we then kind of find a lot of creepy paraphernalia down in this crypt, which then leads to this cat and mouse chase, which initially you're still thinking, is this like an uber violent version of Roadkill, which has another title, the Steve Zahn and Paul Walker horror thriller. But no, you soon realise that this is more of a horror-focused film, and a supernatural one at that. The performance of Darry, I think, is really good. He just has that kind of like, well, Darry and Trish, they have that kind of wholesome brother-sister teasing kind of relationship, which then gets pushed to its limits when they're being pursued by this non-stop killing machine. And through this, there's a lot of great set pieces, leading us to this finale in the police station where it looks as though they're both going to get it. They're both going to get killed, or are the police backup going to arrive in time to kill the creeper before the creeper reveals it has these kind of winged things on its head, which, from a practical perspective, I don't know what they're meant to do, but was another evolution of the appearance of this creature, and also wings. And it flies off with Darry. And I was watching this film for the very first time on DVD, and I remember thinking, I don't think there's much left in the film. Like runtime, like if I look on the little bar at the bottom of my DVD player, it says like 4.5 minutes remaining. So how are they going to get Darry back in that time? And they don't. You hear these screams in this kind of meat packing place that then get cut off. And you then see Darry hung up, and if you're watching live on the stream, you can kind of see an image, which is actually from the sequel, where his eyes have gone because this creature takes body parts to regenerate itself and survive, and does this every 23 years. Yeah, it's pretty full on. It's not an uber violent film. This is a 15 rating in the UK, which I guess is like PG-13 in America, maybe. But similar to that. But it kind of had that good balance with those sort of 15 rated horrors where it's not gratuitous on the gore. The implication of what's occurred is freaky enough. And if you have those good implications along with this is essentially a bit more of a thriller horror, because there's this pursuing element, this cat and mouse game throughout. Yeah, that's kind of similar with slashers, of course, but it certainly had this kind of thriller tone, which I've talked before, you just don't really get these days, and I always think it's a bit of a shame. But his first foray into horror, mainstream horror, was Jeepers Creepers, and I do feel I will need to give it a rewatch and just put my concern to one side. Although I don't know if you can, because it is really horrible, and it's not just an allegation. It was convicted. It was found guilty in court. And I think that's just what I struggle to get past. But yeah, Jeepers Creepers was his first entry. He did return in a bit of a smaller role in the sequel that came out 2003, Jeepers Creepers 2. Written and directed again by Victor Salva. Sequel to the 2001 film, the film portrays the creeper, demonic creature, and mysterious serial killer who pursues a school bus filled with high school students. Ray Wise also appears as Jack Taggart, a farmer who seeks to hunt down and kill the creeper as revenge for his younger son, who the creeper had murdered the same week. Francis Ford Coppola returned to the franchise as an executive producer. So, we won't talk about the whole plot of this film, because ultimately Justin Long only has a small role in this. This is set after the events of the first film, and as we know, at the end of the end of the first film, man's lost his peepers. Man's blinkers be gone. But he appears in visions. Now, I can't remember if there's any visions in the first film. I don't think there is, from memory. But a particular character in this film gets visions from Billy Taggart and Darry Jenner warning about the creeper. It's only a couple of times. And I guess the main moment is where Darry appears again to sort of reveal what the creeper has done to him. Because initially he does have his eyes when he's first talking to her. I just remember seeing this the first time and being like, it gets better. The whole finale is pretty decent, especially when the creeper just won't be stopped. The creeper's taking like javelins to the faces and harpoon spears and keeps pushing on and keeps trying to eat its next, victim. Those moments are pretty good because they make the creeper itself quite scary. What can you do to stop this thing that is inhuman and will take all this assault but keep pursuing to eat whatever part it's looking to eat next? I think it even eats someone's face at one point, eats someone's head off or something like that in this film at some point. It tears off an injured player's head and uses it to replace its own after it's been decapitated. Something like that. Anyway, Darry has a very small role in this. I figured it would be worth mentioning it because of, it's come directly after the first film. But I can't talk too much about his performance because it was very brief. He's not phoning it in, though. And it is good to have that return. I think it would have been a nice touch as well to have, considering this is on the same week as the events of that film, to have a bit of a catch up with Trish. I know her parents pick her up at the end of the first film, but I don't know. I always kind of felt like, have we just forgotten about her? I know this is the same sort of week and there's other events going on, but it's a bit of an odd narrative choice in Jeepers Creepers 2. Next up is an interesting one. A lot of people love this film. It didn't do a lot for me, and that's Drag Me to Hell. Drag Me to Hell is a 2009 American supernatural horror film directed and co-written by Sam Raimi with Ivan Raimi, starring Alison Lohman, Justin Long, Lorna Raver, Dilly Brell, David Palmer, and Adriana Bazzara. The story focuses on a lone officer who, because she has to prove to her boss that she can make the hard decisions at work, chooses not to extend an elderly woman's mortgage. The old woman secretly places a retaliatory curse on her that, after 3 days of escalating torment, will plunge her into the depths of hell to burn for eternity. So, Justin Long's performance in this, he isn't the main focal point. He is the boyfriend of Christina. I think the issue that I had with this film was just my issue with a lot of later Sam Raimi films, and that is, it's just the CGI. I don't know why I always just sort of found it so distracting. And I think, was this film originally released in 3D? Because I'm sure that there were these moments that just felt like they were filmed for the 3D audience. And that is when you get moments where all of a sudden something is coming directly at the camera and it just feels like, oh, this is meant to be one of those moments where if I'm in the cinema with those glasses on, I'd go, all right, okay, that's the 3D, is it? Because 3D cinema always looked crap. I can't see anything on here mentioning about 3D, so maybe not. Maybe it wasn't released 3D. But it is just one of those films where I kind of felt that outside of Evil Dead and then non-horror, but the Spider-Man films, I kind of wondered if Sam Raimi was a director that I was that big of a fan of, just because that sort of CGI wasn't really for me. But maybe I do need to give it another rewatch. Maybe I just was watching it a bit of a time when I was a bit jaded with that sort of horror, and then that had a bit of an impact on my enjoyment. It's all quite possible. It just felt a bit silly. But then again, like I say, been a very long time since I've watched it. In terms of his role in this film, yeah, he's the partner, he's the boyfriend. He is trying to understand what is going on with Christine, where at the same time, you know, he's playing that kind of mild-mannered nice guy, which is a role he's kind of become synonymous with his comedy films. But I think with horror, what that does for Justin Long is gives him the opportunity to really kind of step outside of that box, because whilst in comedy films he generally does play the hapless nice guy, hapless funny guy, he gets to skirt around that quite a bit, especially in the next few projects. But Drag Me to Hell, I don't know. I probably do need to give it a rewatch and review my feelings on it. Have a look in the chat. So regarding Jeepers Creepers, Franacan says, beating you. The clue is in the license plate. Crimson Mouse says, I'm a fan of Drag Me. I thought it was a fun one, and I thought it was interesting they used lore about the Lamia. In Greek mythology, the Lamia was the lover of Zeus and was cursed by Hera. Hera took Lamia's kids and killed them. Lamia went insane, started to kidnap kids and eat them. She's sort of the Greek version of the boogeyman. I didn't know any of that, Crimson Mel. That's pretty interesting. I had no idea about that, and I do enjoy a bit of Greek mythology, has to be said. Yeah, Drag Me to Hell. Things get weirder now, guys. We're not going to more mainstream stuff. We're kind of going a bit more left field. This is probably his step away from the mainstream for a little while. Kevin Smith's Tusk. Now, I remember when I first watched this. I'd heard very mixed things about this. The 2014 independent body horror comedy psychological thriller, written and directed by Kevin Smith, based on a story from his Smodcast podcast. The film stars Michael Parks, Justin Long, Haley Joel Osment, Genesis Rodriguez, Lily Rose Depp, and Johnny Depp. The film is the first in Smith's planned True North trilogy, followed by Yoga Hosers, which I've never seen, but I've heard bad things about. The film deals with an arrogant podcaster played by Justin Long, who travels to Canada for an interview and in the process meets an eccentric retired sailor with dark plans related to his obsession with a walrus named Mr. Tusk. Right. I've never heard any Smodcast podcasts, but in the last 3 or 4 years, I have become a big fan of an adjacent podcast called Tell 'em Steve Dave, which I haven't heard Kevin Smith on, but I believe in the past he's probably been on. It's related to The Comic Book Men, which is a series that I enjoy, which is on Freevee. It's from a few years ago, about the Secret Stash comic book store, which at that time these people worked at. And it's also got Brian Quinn from, or Q, from Impractical Jokers. Very, very funny podcast. I really enjoy that. But Kevin Smith I've been a fan of. The first film of his I saw was Dogma. Very hard to come by these days due to whatever legal issues there are. But Dogma was brilliant. Clerks is great. Chasing Amy's pretty good. More Rats is brilliant. So he has that really good niche of independent comedies. In later years, he's gone out to do more. I did Red State, which was a bit horror, a bit tense standoff thriller. I didn't really like Red State. I thought the setup for it was a lot more interesting than how it went. The trailers, I remember thinking, God, this looks like a really good tense, like kind of not teen horror in terms of teen focus, but teens thinking they're hooking up with a girl from the internet, and then it turns out it's actually like this murderous cult, murderous religious cult, and it starts off like that. And I always remember then thinking after like the half hour, 45-minute mark, and it becomes like a Mexican standoff like Waco, or Waco, I should say, that it lost it for me. It felt like it was trying to do too many things, and that's kind of similar, I guess, with Tusk, body horror, comedy, psychological thriller. So, performance-wise, this film is great. Justin Long again is great. He's a bit arrogant, as mentioned in the blurb, but that he does have heart. While he makes some bad decisions, he overlooks signs in his relationship that his best friend and his girlfriend are cheating on him. So there's obvious signs there. His pursuit of a story, and then just not wanting to waste a trip to Canada after that story falls through. Just this kind of obsession for his podcast to work, interviewing eccentric people, leading him into what should be, known as a very, very dangerous situation. And then he meets what's his name, Michael Parks, and this is where things start falling apart, which is very much the setup. Is that Justin Long then gets held captive and has his legs removed. Okay, fine. So this is going a bit of a misery route, maybe, except for not an eccentric fan, but keeping someone prisoner and almost like hobbling them, but to the next extreme, removing their legs. But then it all comes into this whole story that this guy was a sailor. He crashed his boat and was stranded, and then made friends with a seal who saved his life. But ultimately, or a walrus, I should say, not a seal, but in the end, they had to sort of battle it out to survive because they both starve. And this guy's wanted to do that again to also thank Mr. Tusk for saving. It's like, come on. I know Kevin Smith likes his Mary Jane, but it's getting a little bit. I don't know how this got financed, and I like Kevin Smith. I like all the people involved, but I would have to think at some point, whoever financed it, unless he's just fully self-financed, it would. If it wasn't that case, then someone would have had to go. Okay, really? Especially as the film progresses and we get to the finale where Justin Long has been sewn into a bodysuit of a walrus, where his femur bones, I think, have been whittled down into the big sort of like, I'm going to say fangs, but that's not the correct word, big teeths. And he's been sewn as such into this suit that his body it'll become part of his body, which doesn't make any biological sense as far as I'm aware. Let's have a quick look on the blurb when it gets to that bit. Howard conditions Wallace to think and behave like a walrus, reveals that shortly before being rescued, he had killed and eaten Mr. Tusk to survive. Overcome with guilt, he has spent the last 15 years turning his victims into his beloved saviour in an attempt to relive their last day and give Mr. Tusk another chance at survival. The two engage in a fight that ends with Wallace impaling Howard on his tusks. It's absolutely madness. But here we go. He attaches Wallace to a walrus costume made of human skin, complete with tusks made from Wallace's severed tibia bones, in such a manner that Wallace's body will heal into it, rendering it a permanent part of his body. And I get with horror, you don't always need a happy ending, and quite often you don't get a happy ending, and sometimes that's part of horror. It's not always tied up loosely. But I remember just when I was watching this, by the point of getting to the point where he's being conditioned to turn into basically a human walrus, I was like, oh my god, what the hell am I watching? And the very finale where, does Wallace still have some of his humanity, but he now lives as a walrus? It's like, I remember thinking this is bullshit. I didn't really like this. I don't know many people that did, but yeah, Tusks has derailed me somewhat. He did also do House of Darkness. We won't really talk much about that. I did review that a little while ago. I didn't think it was very good. His performance in it, again, good, but I didn't think much of the film. We'll move on to Tusk, not Tusk. We'll move on from fucking Tusk. We'll move on from Tusk to Barbarian. And there's another film I was going to chat about, It's a Wonderful Knife, but again, we reviewed that not too long ago. It's fine. His performance in it's fine. We'll wrap things up with Barbarian and then one more thing. So Barbarian, 2022 American horror film, written and directed by Zach Cregger in his solo screenwriting and directorial debut. Stars Georgina Campbell, Bill Skarsgård, and Justin Long. The plot sees a woman finding out that the rental home she reserved has been accidentally double booked by a man, not knowing of a dark secret within the dwelling. So his role in this film is pretty interesting. He plays the owner of the house, an actor called AJ Gilbride. So in the opening of the film, this woman finds she's double booked with another chap. And while staying in this house, they notice that there is in the basement, a hidden door. And behind that door seems to be one room that has a heavily stained bed from memory with a camcorder on a tripod facing it. A little bit creepy. And then further down, there are tunnels. And whilst investigating these tunnels, there's a few other things that go on. Bill Skarsgård's character gets his head caved in really viciously by a monster at this stage. But then we all of a sudden cut to a few weeks later where we meet AJ, which is Justin Long, who's been fired from a television series over allegations that he has raped a co-star, something that he confirms in a conversation with a friend. And he's being pressured to sell his assets to cover the legal costs, so he needs to inspect the house before selling it, and then he starts to discover these areas that he had no idea about. So with his role here, I mean, straight away it's quite detestable, the actions which were mentioned. But he does play, for parts of this film, Justin Long, which is that I'm that charming guy, I'm not a bad guy, you know, there's all this stuff going on, it's a misunderstanding, people are taking advantage, blah, blah, blah. I am a nice guy. And you can't help but kind of feel that, okay, well, maybe things just haven't gone, maybe if he's been set up or whatever, you know, he can't have done these things. But through his decisions as the film continues, you're like, actually, this guy's a piece of shit. Actually, Justin Long is playing an absolute bad boy. And he's a bad boy, but he's a bad man. He's not a good person. Even so far near the end, where he essentially, for self-preservation, tries to distract the pursuing monster with shoving the other survivor off the top of this water tower. Yeah, it's disturbing, this film, in places, but it is incredible. I mean, I watched Barbarian not knowing anything about it, and I think that's purely the best way to approach it, because it is shocking, it's tense. I didn't even know Justin Long was in this film until I watched it, and he really goes on a roller coaster, and you go on a roller coaster of emotions with the character, because you think, surely he's not that bad of a guy. Actually, no, he did do these things he's been accused of. That is awful. Oh, actually, he would quite happily push another woman to her death to try and save himself, you know. Selfish dick. Around the can in the chat, less Justin Long and more Justin Wrong in this film. Definitely. And Crimson Man might have to give Barbarian a watch. Yes. Forget what I've said about Barbarian. Watch it on it's Disney Plus in the UK, or Prime. I think it's on Prime here as well, but also I think it was Hulu in America. Try and forget everything about Barbarian before watching it if you can. It's a great film. I really enjoyed Barbarian. It was one of my favourites of 2022 for sure. And then, yeah, we won't talk about It's a Wonderful Knife, but we will talk finally about his foray. He's been known to do a lot of TV. He was on that TV show Ed, which was like a comedy dramedy, but it always felt more drama with a bit of a light-hearted approach, but he was in that. He's in a few TV things. New Girl, he was in that when it was good. He's also recently jumped into Goosebumps on Disney Plus and Hulu. Goosebumps is an American supernatural horror television series developed by Rob Letterman and Nicholas Stoller for Disney Plus and Hulu. Based on the book series by R.L. Stine, the series abandons the episodic anthology format of the 1995 original TV series to focus on a serialized anthology style of storytelling instead, changing storylines from season to season instead of episode to episode, while still featuring some of the existing Goosebumps monsters and items episodically. So his role in this is pretty good. He is a teacher who has also been possessed by a spirit in the house. And again, we get that nice mix of Justin Long kind of playing Justin Long. I'm the bumbling nice guy. I'm a bit clumsy, I'm funny, I'm a bit, oh God, I keep making mistakes. But as it turns out, he ends up getting possessed by this dead school kid in this house. And the story goes some pretty good places. He gets to have that mixture of being really quite menacing at times, to then forgetting what's going on, not being too sure, and his personality is almost trapped inside of himself. It's a nice little role. I mean, I think the series was decent. The only sort of trap I had with the show, and again, I don't know if this comes down to the devices that I have, but I do find with some Disney Plus shows, the HDR settings pre-built into the app are a bit too intense. Quite often with some Disney Plus shows, again, I think it could just be depending on what app I'm using it on, what device I'm using the app on, but some shows I have to then get the TV controller and adjust the brightness up, or adjust my TV settings, because I'm like, I can't really see what's going on. And I did feel with Goosebumps that for me, from my viewing experience, sometimes it was a bit too much like, I can't really see what's happening right now. It almost felt like at moments like that one episode of the last series of Game of Thrones with the Battle of the Long Night, I think it was called, where it was a great episode of TV. I don't care what people say about the last series of Game of Thrones. I thought that was a really good battle episode. But there were times where it was like, I can hear swords clashing. I can't see what's happening. But that's a minor detail, and that could be an app issue or a setting issue. As a show went, it was not too bad, actually. It was pretty good in places. So Crimson Mallet Chat says, so Goosebumps is no longer an anthology series? Fran says, he was the standout in the first series of Goosebumps. I had fun with this. Eddie prefers the films. Fran says, the first season was kind of a mix. You had an overarching story, but the first half had episodes that were inspired by different stories from the book series. Yeah, I really quite enjoyed this at places. It wasn't, knocking it out the park every episode, but when we got into the latter half and the story started connecting together quite nicely, it worked quite well. And we had Slappy the puppet in it, so you can't really go wrong there. Well, that's going to wrap us up for this evening's show. Thank you very much for those watching live on twitch.tv/Tezzius, Tezzius. I'll endeavour to get the podcast audio and the repeat of this on YouTube and podcast platforms over the weekend, so be sure to give us a watch, a listen, and subscribe, like, follow, whatever on the platform of your choice. Really does help. Share it with your horror friends. Get the news out there. Be sure to also check out, again, Crimson Mel Show's Unexplained Possibilities on YouTube and podcast platforms. Be sure to keep an eye out for Lawrence doing any streams. I know he's been getting the itch to get back into podcasting, so keep an eye out for what he does there. Also, I have noticed that Mr. Lee Tyers has now got back into the world of wrestling podcasting. So I believe that his show is called Only Heels and Faces. He's had a few interviews with the likes of AJ Kirsch and Marty Skrull. So be sure to check that out. Lee is an awesome guy. His he's gone for he's gone to hell and back in the last couple of years, and be sure to give the show a follow. I think Andy Evans might also be involved, who did or does the retro. Oh god, I can't remember the name of it now, but he did a retro show which I really quite enjoyed a few episodes of that whilst on the MOS network. And of course on Sundays, Bericles Paul Barrow does the Wrestling Arena. Be sure to follow that on YouTube or podcast platforms. You never know, I may appear again in a future show, but always give these shows a follow. We will hang about a little bit for a chat on the live stream, but for now on the recording, I'll see you later.